basically said if there's a record in YouTube and video recording, that can be a record for this. I mean, that there is a record of the proceedings. And so the concept is that then somebody can go back and check that if they really wanted to against the minutes and check the video against the minutes. But I mean, it makes it tricky when the commission is not the same commission that is here presently. I mean, that makes it super difficult. People feel uncomfortable about it. And, you know,
Well, if the attorney says that it's a sticking point, then I would just say, here's the links. We need you guys to review it up until you feel comfortable voting on it.
yeah.
And then we're going on day certain, we're gonna go through these and we're gonna talk about it.
And that may not even be necessary, is what he's saying. But I also want our administrative decision because it's really kind of between our attorney and our administrator. I've supported it, but I just want to this is what we're doing. We're moving forward. We're going to get all of 23 done. One's at 22 that we're lingering. But as long as we have present YouTube audio, I think that he basically said there's no need to do it. Not even a prison.
Maybe we could even go as far as to say, especially if there's just work session, and there's no new business taken care of, there's no old business taken care of. We just say, we have a package of the 2022 bills that we cleaned out, take care of housekeeping on, remove, and just do it that way. I have a problem with that, especially with work sessions. It's just as long as we just need to get it off. Let's get it off weekend.
No, and that's what we're trying to do is clean it up. So let me look at the options. I'll come back. But for tonight, I would just say that we're going to do a pause on this.
So we're going to pause on draft meeting minutes September 12th.
Yeah, let's go ahead and then we'll go with adoption. If the planning commission feels appropriate, we'll get to adopt the February 12th for minutes.
Okay, you ready?
We're ready, so don't forget to key your mic up.
Yep. Going live in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. No, I'm just kidding.
Evening, Jenny.
Okay, we're going live. Good evening, City of Canby. We are here with our regularly scheduled meeting for the Canby Planning Commission dated Monday, March 25th. Please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. First item of business is our consent item. This evening we have two listed. We're going to actually defer on draft meeting minutes dated September 12th, 2022. And Planning Director Hardy will take care of resolving those draft meeting minutes. The next consent item will be draft meeting minutes dated February 12th, 2024. We are looking, I will take a motion on draft meeting minutes dated February 12th, 2024.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion that we approve draft meeting minutes for February 12, 2024 as submitted by staff.
I second.
All right, so we will then go to a roll call vote to adopt the draft meeting minutes for February 12th, 2024, starting with Commissioner Llewellyn.
You can't hear us.
Commissioner Driscoll.
Aye.
I'm an aye.
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 And can we get Llewellyn? Commissioner Llewellyn, are you a approval for the draft meeting minutes February 12th, 2024?
Thumbs up.
Is that a thumbs up? All right, perfect. Thank you very much. Draft meeting minutes February 12th, 2024 have been adopted. Next up is citizen input on non-agenda items. This is an opportunity for the members of the public to address the Planning Commission on non-agenda items. Each person will be given 3 minutes to speak. Staff and Planning Commission will make every effort to respond to the questions raised during citizens' input before the meeting ends or as quickly as possible thereafter. You may speak on non-agenda items via Zoom at the dedicated Zoom link no later than, and please send an email to publiccomments@cambyoregon.gov no later than 3 p.m. on March 25th, that's today, and provide your name, the topic you would like to speak on, and your phone number. Do we have any citizen input? We have no citizen input at this time. We have no old business, no new business, and no public hearings at this time. At this point, we will turn it over to Planning Director Hardy to discuss a housing needs analysis and housing production strategy update.
Good evening, Chair Ellison and Commissioners. Tonight is somewhat of a light refresh of the housing needs and housing production strategy work we've been doing. There will be a more deep dive on this on April 22nd, which is another work session, following the April 17th City Council work session on the same topic. The housing needs and housing production strategy processes have been a little more involved than I was anticipating in terms of going through and doing evaluations of the amount of residential land that's needed over the next 20 years based on our forecasted population. Some of this is the nuances in the state process for buildable lands inventory. Some of it is timeliness of responses we've received from the state. Not wanting to put anybody on the spot, but just it's taken longer than expected to do that process. Then the housing production strategy, similarly, there are elements to that we addressed previously, but that are also, there's new elements that will be coming back, and we'll dive more into that on April 22nd and also on the April 17th City Council work session, which will be an update. I don't have all of the information at this point. In fact, I have new drafts just as of today, I had a draft last week, and so I have a new draft, and so this is evolving for both housing needs and housing production, but I did feel it was valuable to bring the Planning Commission up to speed as to where we're going, so none of this is a surprise, and as we move this forward, you'll have a better understanding of where this is all going. So with that, we're kind of talked about these items already. We're going to talk about next steps tonight. And so this really is kind of the gist of it, and I'm boiling this down, and when we get to the hearings for this, which I'm believing will be probably May 13th for the Planning Commission and June 5th for the Council, that's at least what I'm anticipating, that there'll be a lot more to this, and there'll be a full packet, and you'll get like all the housing production strategy documents and all the housing needs documents. But I felt like tonight the two items I really wanted to hit on were what is the current, right as we speak, likelihood of an expansion need within Canby in different scenarios, and this is what the state requires us to do. And we're looking at high, medium, and low, and I want you to frame that in the sense that high means that there's a high percentage of anticipated absorption of vacant and partially vacant land. So it's not necessarily a robust forecast. It's actually high as a conservative forecast in the sense that it assumes 100% of all vacant land and 100% of all partially vacant land would be absorbed in the next 20 years. That's pretty unlikely, probably, in my opinion. I've not seen that in my career where that's happened in a 20-year period. All the land in a city is absorbed within that time frame. And so that's the high. The medium is a scenario that addresses partially vacant land and the ability to develop that, but not fully. And then the low is based on our historic participation rates, which means that what is the percentage of development that has happened historically on vacant and partially vacant land. And that's a little bit of an outlier, the low is, but just as a framework in the sense of what we're looking at. So I just wanted you to all understand that. So this then will help to understand that better, and kind of the housing needs piece of this is on the high, which again assumes high land use scenario, 100% conversion of vacant and partially vacant land. There's about 6.4 acres of medium density residential, R15, and about 6.6 acres of high density residential for a total of 13 acres. That would be assuming all land is absorbed in the city, 100% vacant and partially vacant. It's still 13 acres needed. And not surprising, since there's 6,000 population anticipated over the next 20 years and 2,300 residential units roughly. The medium includes a reduction again on the conversion based on partially vacant land, and would result in about 15.6 acres of low density residential, 12.2 acres of medium density residential, and 10.7 acres of high density residential, or about 38.9 acres. I did want to point out that DLCD has not seen these numbers yet either, so there's a vetting process. These may be adjusted slightly, hopefully not radically, but they're going to have to go through the filter and make sure they agree with these as well. And then the low, which would be based on our historic conversion, you're going to see the acreage needs being much higher, which is 53 acres of low-density residential, 21.7 acres of medium-density residential, and 14.1 acres of high-density residential, for a total of about 89 acres. So the likelihood is that the medium residential scenario is what we believe would end up being the one that DLCD would likely support, with the outliers being the high land use scenario and the low land use scenario. Also, the low land use scenario has not been tested through an adoption process according to DLCD, so there's not really a precedent set for that, and there will be some risk in going that route. So this again kind of leads to what I'm anticipating going into further detail, and we'll actually, before we get to May 13th, which I'm assuming will be the hearing, the actual adoption hearing and the recommendation by Planning Commission, we'll be talking again on April 22nd. And I'll bring forward more information on April 22nd as well. We've talked a number of times about housing, and there's been questions about, well, is this really affordable, or what are your metrics of, like, how are you looking at the, your down payment, et cetera. More of that will be provided as we talk further into other work sessions and into the hearing process, but largely that's been updated, and I think it's more reflective of the realities. It's challenging to create affordable housing in the current market. I mean, just period. But can we make it more affordable? We absolutely can. And I think, is it important to do that? I think it absolutely is. I don't think housing prices are going to go down anytime soon, and it will be a critical factor. I noticed geographically, it's kind of an indicator when schools are laying staff off, and that has to do, I believe, in some ways, and this is the geography that we're in here globally as a metro area, that housing affordability does, I believe, play into that. Now, it also is people not having babies, and that's another element too, and so you get these waves of kids coming in, but the Canby School District is like on a flat 5-year horizon, as we understand from meeting with them. I know other schools are in that same situation, but not having affordable housing or more affordable housing does not help the situation either. So that's another element in the dynamics of this whole situation. So that, I think, is an important element to consider as we move forward as well.
I think that to put in,
When the high school was here for their expansion, they were at zero growth for the next 10 years. So,
yeah, and they've again, we're having conversations with them, and it's challenging because you're being asked to look beyond that for this growth boundary issue, because that's an important element. mean, we need to look at all those things. We need to look at parks. We need to look at fire, police, and schools. Those are the elements that we're required to look at, in addition to employment lands and commercial lands and residential lands. That's kind of the core, but those other ones are being asked. And so we're having some conversations with the school district. There'll be more conversations about that, which is, it's difficult right now because they're like, well, we have a flat situation. Well, what is it going to, it's a little bit of a guess, but there's demography that can be used to some degree on that, but hopefully it reverts, and even I've seen it in, my personal life where a school was quite large and then it went from a 3A to a 2A, as a high school. So, it does ebb and flow depending on where people live and those kinds of things, but it generally swings. It goes, there's like booms and busts in the demography. And so I think right now there's just not a lot of kids that are in the school districts, just in general, I would say here in the metro area. It could end up changing over time.
It was pretty much flat for the 22 years that I worked for the school district.
Yeah.
It's been, we would, since I was involved with activities a lot, we watched every single student of increase because we lived on that little tiny margin that was left, after all the other expenses, and they get compensated per student. And so it was something that we watched quite a bit. And yeah, it's, in fact, I think it's gone down a little bit overall since when I first got the job here.
Now, in that scenario, has the number of housing units or people living there gone up, but the school stayed the same? Okay, thank you.
And maybe a broader trend, to your point. I think part of that is, there's maybe some wishful thinking that it will rebound and come back up. But I think some of that is, I guess my point is it probably is less likely to happen when that rebound comes at some point if there just isn't the options for people. And that has to do with not just, kids, but, people that have entry-level homes to be able to buy. Having that as an opportunity is important. And the housing needs, I won't go into all that tonight about what incomes can afford what rent and what mortgages, but we'll get into that more on the 22nd and then on May 13th as well. So I wanted to jump into housing production. That was kind of the high level on housing needs analysis, and there's a little bit more to it on demography and also the mortgages and what people can afford, and then what does that mean in terms of units, specifically of the 2,300, what is needed. Just roughly off the top, about 30% is traditional homes that you've seen around. That's not a large figure when that number's been in the range of 60 to 70% historically of repeat customer kind of situation. It's about 30% based on incomes, traditional single-family homes, detached. But more information will come as we'll dive into that. I wasn't intending to go into detail tonight on that. And then go ahead.
Well, just a quick clarification on affordable housing. So I was reading an article, the governor's office is one of their methodologies of trying to tackle affordable housing was to basically seed money for utilities and infrastructure to offset some of the large cost to bring housing into a community. Has City of Canby or Clackamas County as a whole been having conversations with the governor's office in any way around those programs? Has any of that come up?
Not to this point. Is that part of the Senate Bill 1537 that just came out?
Yeah.
And we need to take a deeper dive, and that's probably another work session or part of a work session for that, because there's many elements in that are of interest. I think, I was at one point thinking our acreage demand was virtually non-existent, and now that these numbers have come back, they have the one-time 50-acre urban expansion in there as well, which is somewhat enticing because it looks like Canby may meet many of those provisions, but perhaps not all of them.
Okay.
And so that's one. But the infrastructure piece you're talking about, I will make note of that. But I think that bill, it's fairly large and fairly new, but I think that, is another piece. I think the strings attached to that, which is a great segue, will be that it will be probably marketed or have to be marketed and covenanted at 80% of median family income, which is what the 50-acre one time was based on, which is 50 acres one time, 30% of those units would have to be at 80% median family income and committed to with covenants. So I'm believing, without having read through all the, text and everything, that probably would be similar. So that kind of fits into, well, what is 80% of median family income? What does that look like? Which gets back to the production strategies, which are a little bit, they're longer-term visions. They're within an 8-year time frame, and they have to be implemented. Some of these you're familiar with because of housing efficiency measures, which have not gone away. You just haven't seen them come back. Some of those are required to do an urban growth boundary expansion, period. So what we're talking about, cottage developments, planned unit developments, and commercial, more flexibility on commercial areas and having horizontal instead of just vertical mixed use. So those are things that we are looking at immediately implementing this year. But the other ones that, as we go through that, I mean, that's the template, is that in order to take advantage of those funds, and we'll come back and talk more about that, we have to be more flexible on what is allowed. So there's the carrot and the stick kind of with the money, but but it's, the product type is different.
Got it.
And it's going to look different, and I know that's hard to see, traditional neighborhoods not look the same as they did for the last 50 years, perhaps, but a part of that is those houses are out of the reach of most people. That, that's the unfortunate reality of the situation.
Thank you.
So diving into the housing production strategies, and again, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail here, but I'm just going to identify the main topical items that will be coming back on April 22nd, and these are ones that we're currently reviewing. I want the council to weigh in on these on April 17th. They're in their work session. Both the Planning Commission and the council will be important weigh-ins. We're kind of wading our way through this with the LCD as well as to, well, how much of this has to be in here versus not. And the answers are not like black and white necessarily. It's somewhat gray. So we're still going through that process. But the first one is develop process for identifying lands to upzone. And this could be things like looking at the current comprehensive plan, and there are areas that are earmarked that have for higher density near the Walnut Street extension, the special area J area. Even the current comprehensive plan identifies that as a mix of medium density and high density residential. Even the plan in 1984 recognized that. So I'd say that'd be one of those kinds of things that would be addressed. Maybe proximity to roadways and transit; those would be kind of things that we'd be looking at. But these are, again, items that have to be developed over an 8-year period of time. And some of these, except for the efficiency measures, which we're going to be adopting hopefully this year, those are the exceptions to that. The cottage cluster is one of those exceptions. Again, that's an efficiency measure. Allow cottage clusters in residential zones. And then next one is the same thing, identify opportunities to streamline planning unit development, PUDs. And then this next one, incentives to encourage diverse housing development and PUDs. We're looking at both those again as housing efficiency measures. And then modifying system development fees, schedule and scale charges based on home size. And that's a very that tool, I think, is being used a lot throughout Oregon to do that. The question becomes, and I know this is going to be a question, is how do we know that the developer is actually passing on the cost? So we have to start to look at, this is part of the conversation, covenants. And those kinds of things that run with that. So there needs to be some discussion around that issue. I do think it's unfortunate the way we're going to be updating our system development charges holistically as well. I've added that to our work plan for 24-25, and so by this time next year, we'll be talking about adoption hearings, which will update parks, sewer, storm, and traffic. Those will all be updated, which have not been updated for a while. So that system development piece, back to that, is what I was going to say. It's unfortunate that the current way it's done, you could have a 3,000, 4,000 square foot home or a 1,000 square foot home. You're paying the same SDC. that doesn't seem exactly proportionate to me, but how do we get to that issue about, that whole thing of the desire to create the affordability and to give the break, and then the question also becomes, how does that also equalize over the system? And I believe the city of Newport, Oregon has done that, and they've formulated this where they have done those exceptions, and then somehow they've spread that cost so they came out whole, so you're not just losing the money. So you come up with your total of what everything costs, and then it goes through a fairly elaborate process. But it's like larger homes, 4,000 square foot home probably would pay more, for example, versus a 1,000 square foot or 800 square foot home. So there's a scalability issue. This, again, we're not going to dive into the details tonight, but these are concepts. Again, they're framing this up. They're not saying we're going to do it next year, but again, these are things that we have to go through and adopt within an 8-year period. If we don't end up doing them, we have to renegotiate with the LCD. So this is a package of strategies that are hopefully helping affordability and diversification of housing.
When it's appropriate, when it's appropriate to learn more about the covenants, I'd be interested to hear more.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, it feels like we're already kind of diving down that path because everything that the state legislature is doing, that kind of feels where it's going. And we don't have a lot of experience with that. We'll definitely have to lean on other jurisdictions and figure out what they're doing.
Can you give us like a 10,000-foot view summary of basically what they are?
It would basically be a recorded document. It would run with the land that would, like if on your title report, it would have that on there. And so I don't know how many years it would be.
You're talking about CCNRs, right? Like covenants, codes, restrictions,
It would be
like that?
different. It would be different than that in the sense
Okay.
that those are generally privately enforced. This would be between the city of Canby and the homeowner, or the developer rather. That would be the relationship. And so how many years would it run? Is it in perpetuity? I've seen these work in other cities where, like workforce housing, 10-year tax break, and again, that was kind of what happened, and then they had a certain rent.
And then it just gets jacked up.
Yeah, well, I'm not saying it's going to go away in 10 years, but I'm just saying that those are questions that are out there, like,
Yeah.
What is that? What is a sunset typically of those? That would be part of that discussion.
Yeah, and what I'd be kind of curious to know about tying it to the developer, something that we see with a lot of, like the multi-unit development, is the developer builds the building, they sell it to somebody else, and then they walk away, and whoever still owns it, maybe a rental company, maybe some individual people, are responsible for maintenance on things like the road that it's on, and it kind of is just a little bit of a big shrug, like who's really going to take care of it? So tying it to something a little bit more in perpetuity would probably be to our advantage.
And we'll get more information back to House Bill 1537 and the covenant piece. I need to dive into the research on that, but I think those are some things that probably will come up more in those discussions, especially when we get into the hearings. We won't be able to solve every single item, and they're not intended to be like project specific, but they're more global, and they're aspirational aspects of like, we're going to do these things. And it's challenging because like the planning commission could change in 4 years, the council could change in 4 years. And I think the state understands and that dynamic of that situation, but it's part of it. It's trying to create a set of packages of strategies to at least have it working. It's like a work plan for like, how are we going to go about doing these things? And it is an interesting situation because unlike commercial and industrial, you're not necessarily revisiting those all the time, whereas housing's kind of this like, you're revisiting it. That's the theme here that I'm learning is there's a constant theme here on housing, which is until it becomes less challenging on affordability, I think we're going to continue to see that. So, the next one I was going to dive into just a few more education for, on permitting for property owners. It's a fairly easy one, but just like, that's another piece of this. Amending the commercial zone to allow mixed use housing, which again is like the 99. We've talked about 99E and allowing horizontal and vertical, which is currently allowed, but allowing separate housing types that are independent, but on a property with commercial already on it, not removing the commercial, not not eliminating commercial from, it's still, there'd be a need to have a certain percentage of commercial, so you're not removing the main purpose of what you have on those areas is they've been commercial in their nature, but can they also have other things if they're complementary and there's available space? And then reducing lot sizes, this has to do primarily with like townhomes and those kinds of things that would, again, more discussion around those, but what's happening in the market on townhomes and those kind of developments. Increasing building heights. This one, I think in residential areas, it's very tricky, and my personal opinion is if that were to happen, it would have to come with a set of design standard elements to address articulation, and I feel like that needs to go hand in hand with that stepping back structures, those kinds of things, I think is important, which is challenging because I think that's not always really considered by the state. So I think that's an element here. Updating residential zones, and those would be like recognizing, mobile homes are allowed outright in R15, mobile home parks, recognizing the value of mobile home parks as providing a form of affordable housing and protecting that, and updating design standards is another one. And that's, again, preserving naturally occurring affordable housing, again, is about that. The idea behind that would be like primarily mobile homes. There's a number of mobile home parks. Many of them are quite nice. And just not making them non-conforming because they've been there and they're inconsistent because they're in a commercial zone, but saying they're conforming use. Looking at, if they're in residential areas, making sure that they are being treated equally, that if you do an R15 and you do the density in R15, you can do the same thing at a mobile home park. Yes.
Specific to the mobile homes, the mobile home parks, one of the things that really makes them unaffordable is the land that they're on and the fact that the land rent just keeps going up.
The land lease,
could we potentially look at some kind of covenant that would put some kind of cap, a restriction or limit on how much it can be increased year over year over a certain period of time to kind of help extend the affordability? Because it's hard to get mortgages for manufactured homes because they really only have a lifetime of like 30 years. So by the time you pay it off, it's basically what most banks would consider something you really shouldn't keep selling, but they do keep selling. But the land piece of it, if there's something we might be able to look at, could be helpful for folks.
And it's an interesting question, I think. And another one, just right out of the box, I'm not really sure the relationship we have with the influence on how properties are taxed, but that would be, could there be a way to not have this continuous, like the land is worth X and the guy's paying rent for X for the whole property, and then that keeps escalating, and therefore the rents for the individual tenants keep escalating. And I know that Ashland did something, and I need to dive into that further. I don't know if they went quite that far, but there have been some communities that have actually kind of tried to address this more in detail.
Yeah, I've only ever encountered mobile home parks where somebody else owns the land and they're basically leasing it to somebody who has a manufactured home, except for in really rural areas. I've never seen mobile home on owned land.
So they have a couple of them. There's one not too far out of town where it's manufactured homes on real property. So they pay taxes like any other single family home would, but a lot more common is the manufactured homes in a park. And if it's in a park, they're on leased land, and that lease is subject to go up. Not necessarily every year, but it's almost guaranteed it will go up.
It's usually pretty steep.
Yeah.
The ones here on the south of town, I think they're like 800 or more.
I showed a client one that was at $750 and it was subject to go up to $950 the following year.
Yes.
That's a $200 jump.
Yeah.
That's a big deal.
Yeah, so if there's something we can do to make owned land more accessible.
Yeah, and I totally hear what you guys are saying. And just as a small segue, Washington State Legislature did not adopt, this is a different state, but same topic, where they were doing rent control, and that did not make its way through. But to your point, it's in the paper, and it's like you see, exactly like you see these fairly high jumps that are difficult for people in those circumstances. So I think that's another piece that needs some investigation. I can report back more on that. The last one's partnerships with Clackamas County, and that's really related to primarily the homeless population. And partnerships, what do those look like? I think the partnerships with Clackamas County, they have large funding sources to provide grants, et cetera. We have Canby Center, we have the library, we have the police. So these kinds of things can be anything from transitional services that the library, let's say the library helps out with resumes or job coaching, and so does Canby Center, same thing. Like kind of the police interface with, they have a person that's does their kind of outreach for their community, and there may be things like, these are grants that have actually been submitted that would be like food subsidies or overnight subsidies, those kinds of things. I don't see us creating homeless housing here, but there is something in these housing production strategies that are part of this process that DLCD requires us to address and recognize what that is. What is it in the community? What can we do to help in reducing that? And that's another strategy. So, and some of these are like, they're more, their partnership in the sense that, I think they relate to helping people not get into those situations or come out of those situations. And so there's that element to it. But we're not being asked to build shelters here. But I think that's part of it. I think largely that's probably where that's going to go as a county focus, because they have departments and they're much bigger and they do more regional things.
If there's something we can do to either request grant funding or somehow have funds available to the community for people to kind of save them from eviction kind of thing, there's a lot of people find themselves, they're already paycheck to paycheck. Something like comes out of the blue, like their car breaks down, like their rent gets jacked up a couple $100s a month and they can't cover it. But if you can give them small loans, potentially as a 1 or 2 time thing, you might be able to keep them from having to live in their car and not have a place to be. So we might look into something like that.
Yeah, and I think those are all parts of the discussion. I mean, it's a complicated issue. I think really the bottom line in this whole thing is it's all housing, which again, homelessness is another element of housing. I see that as the supports that what can be done to help, alleviate that to the extent that it's a partnership.
Do we have any numbers on what's considered the number of people who are affected who are living here now?
We do. I don't have those off the top of my head. It's not 0 for sure. I mean, and so I think that's, I think part of that is I would need to, provide that back. I know the county's doing some work on the homelessness issue, about kind of investigating that further. That's not something Canby's directly involved with at this point, but they have provided the opportunity to seek grants, and we're trying to, as a city, trying to tap into that money, which I think is helpful, so we can respond with those supports.
Thank you.
In the past, the Canby School District has had an admin whose sole purpose was to contact with houseless students, and there was a couple of hundred of them last time.
Yeah, I knew that there were a good number of them.
And the school district has information, that's a really good point. I think, it's one of those things, there may be kids that don't have a proper home. That's just the reality in most communities here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so, yeah.
Thank you.
So those are housing productions. We're going to get into more detailed discussions about those on the 22nd. And as I mentioned, like the next steps here, council will be hearing about the work session. We'll have more information because the housing production and housing needs analysis documents are being updated, and those are literally being updated as we speak. We're working through with Department of Land Conservation and Development on the details of this. And so the mirroring of the April 17th City Council work session will be on April 22nd for the Planning Commission. I didn't want to make you guys feel like a joint work session was something that, you were being deprived of. Those are just super complicated when we have an hour to go through stuff. So I figured it'd be better to give you the repeat after they've done their item before we get to the hearing in May. So that was just wanted to share that with you. And then these are targets again, and I'm hoping everything works out because until we have this housing production strategy, housing needs analysis done, it's holding a lot of things kind of up, to be honest, in the comprehensive plan work that we're doing, and the housing efficiency measures are right behind that. So I'm trying to get that sorted and resolved. It's a big solve, and I want to recognize that, but it's important that we know from Council and Planning Commission, to the extent we have latitude over the acreage that will be added to the City of Canby's boundary for residential, and the policies related to strategies on housing production strategies, those elements are quite critical. And then the housing efficiency issues is more related to the urban growth boundary expansion. But those are all pieces that I'm trying to keep pushing, and so that's why you keep hearing me repeat this stuff to you as we go along. So that was really kind of it. This is short and sweet tonight, but if there are items that you have concerns with or want more data about, I know you mentioned a few things tonight about House Bill 1537, about covenants for housing. I'll look into that more. Land rent for mobile home parks and kind of what other jurisdictions they're doing on that piece of it. And if there's other things you'd like me to investigate.
Something that might help folks too. So aside from manufactured homes like mobile homes, and there's also prefabricated homes that basically you kind of put three pieces together and then it looks like a stick-built home. They're less expensive, but I know that there's some zoning stuff that would need to happen to allow those, or I believe there'd be some zoning stuff that might need to happen to allow those. If so, perhaps we could check that out.
And I think, prefabricated versus regular stick-built homes, we cannot, make any differentiation between those two. I mean, so those laws are already in place. They've been,
Well, then strike that from the list.
Now, that doesn't, the other part of this is, your private covenants, conditions, and restrictions, the city is not enforcing those, but I'm not even sure if those are enforceable by state statute as well. So, so those are not something we can restrict. Other items? Sorry. Would you like to talk now?
Oh, I can't remember if you guys do two or just one.
For,
Public comment.
we'll do it again at the end. Do you want to talk about housing needs, housing production?
No, I'm good
Okay,
for the end.
okay, yeah. So if there's not other things, there'll be more coming. Hopefully this is helpful. I know we're hitting you with a lot and more's coming. But I'm just trying to make sure that we all understand what these tough decisions are going to be.
So are we at the end?
We are at the end.
Do we open it up for citizen input?
Well, we don't normally, Jason would speak. We could probably just add him to the end before we adjourn.
Okay.
It'd be my recommendation since he missed the beginning of this.
Yeah.
And then he can give his update.
Cool. Do we have any other commissioners that want to have a discussion on what we've covered so far?
No.
Commissioner Llewellyn? Not so much? Nope. No. Okay. Do I need to read the spiel on citizen input, or no?
No, I don't think I mean, I think why don't we just make room for that, and then I'll go into, why don't we change the order, and then I'll go in and give an update on items of interest from the Planning Commission. And he may be speaking on some things I'm going to bring up as well. I have an ask for you guys tonight when I speak about a task force.
Okay.
So I'm not sure if that's what he's coming for, but there may be a double up period here as well. So why don't we let Jason speak as well?
All right.
Do we need to end the work session?
Yeah, let's go ahead. Yeah, if you would end, yeah.
So motion to end the work?
Yeah.
You want a motion for that? Okay, so we're going to go ahead and end the work session, provided we have a motion.
I'd like to make a motion that we close the work session.
I second.
All right, by roll call vote, Commissioner Llewellyn, do you approve? All right. Aye.
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 All right, that concludes our work session. Please proceed, Mr. Padden.
Awesome, so I'm not going to steal Don's thunder of the request, because I forgot that you were going to be asking that, because I asked you to ask that. But anyways, no, I just wanted to say, sorry I was not here earlier. The city council thing came up that I was not planning. I did have every intention to be here on time for you folks. But as your liaison to the council, I just want to say thank you for all of your hard work and effort that you're putting into this. I know that this comprehensive plan and all that stuff is a huge lift. And as your liaison, thank you very much for all the effort that you're putting into this. And if there's anything that I can do to support you, Mr. Ellison, or any other member on the Planning Commission, please don't hesitate to reach out. I will do my best to make sure you're represented. That was it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Padden. All right, Planning Director Hardy, please take it away.
So I'm going to go ahead and segue. So there's a street maintenance task force, and my ask, and I'll give you the description and the spiel here. And then my ask will be, I'd like one or two members from the Planning Commission to participate in this. So, and Jason might have more to say after I say my stuff.
If you have questions about it,
Yeah,
I'm
well,
happy to fill it.
Let me give my spiel. So Street Maintenance Task Force is going to be looking at roads and the level of roads. I mean, first of all, the road network, roads that need to be maintained, the level of standards for road maintenance. And it's going to have 3 meetings. They'll be in the evening. We're trying to get the task force all assembled by April 15th. The first meeting will be in May. And really, it's kind of a level of service issue about maintenance. The fee's already been set, but it's about prioritization and street standard and levels. There'll be Jason Padden and Tracy Hensley from the council. We will have a planning liaison on this. It's really a public works kind of driven to large extent, but planning will have a presence on this as well. We want to hear what's being said. I think there's a reciprocal part of this that kind of goes into the transportation system plan. It's not a direct link, but it's kind of, there's some linkages in my belief. I believe there'll be discussion that will go into that, and so the planning staff were interested in this and participating in that. But I was hoping to get one person for the task force. And I know this sounds a lot like the other advisory boards, but it's very specific. And if you have questions, since we got Jason here, he might be able to assist.
I'll come up and sit back down.
Are alleys included in this?
So just to fill in, for clarification, the city has a street maintenance fee that you all probably have noticed on your bill. It was implemented years ago by the Street Maintenance Task Force. And when it was implemented, it was not tied to an inflationary mechanism. So every year, the fee stays the same, but the value, the amount that fee can accomplish with updating our streets is lessened. Some of the preliminary numbers are that $5 that was collected back when it first started is now worth maybe $2.50 in today's dollars. So the original goal of the task force was to figure out a way to fund street maintenance when the amount that the city was getting from gas tax and just taxes in general, we're not keeping pace with that. So the directive of this task force is to look at the past information, look at where it sits now, and then make a recommendation to the city council. Does the fee get pegged to an inflationary increase each year, which that it has not been pegged to, unlike the park maintenance fee? And then also, if it is pegged, yes or no, should there be some sort of increase either all at once or over time to try and make up for lost revenue because it has not been increased since its inception? So the task force will be meeting to review all of this information and then make a recommendation to council what they think it should do, and then it is up to council to decide whether to follow what the task force recommended or not. The last time this happened, most of what the street maintenance task force recommended was adopted by the council, but there were a few things that were not. And I'm familiar with it because I was originally I was part of the original group that did it. So that's sort of what the task force is going to be doing.
And Jason, so would there be an inventory of, how would this be? Can you walk us through because I think the fee is an important element, but how would that be quantified visually? What are you seeing the steps being?
What am I what?
Well, like the inventory piece of like figuring out,
So
because that's going to
when you're
directly relate to the
talking
fee, yeah.
When you're talking about inventory, there is a thought. So there's the PCI, which is the paving condition index. All of the streets in a system are given a grade of a percentage for the condition in which they are in. And so one of the questions is, do we decide we want the entire city system to be at an 85% index? And if that's the case, then this is how much money it's going to cost to get it from where it's at, which I think right now is in like the 70s. Our CPI in the minds of citizens gets dragged down by how crappy 99E is. Really, the city street network, with the exception of the alleys and some areas, is actually in pretty good shape. Ivy Street also throws it off because Ivy Street is actually a county road, is a state and county road, so we only have so much sway over that. But as far as the overall like CPI for the city, it's actually pretty good. But, do we want to keep it there? If we do, then this is how much needs to be brought in revenue. If we want to move the needle to 85%, then it really needs to look at this and sort of how that is all going to flesh out. One of the other things that is sort of on the mind of folks is a lot of the streets have been put in the last few years through development, and so all of those streets are going to be aging at the same rate, and so they're all going to need the same maintenance all around the same time. And so is there a need to really kind of build up a fund reserve specifically for streets to prepare for all that? So that's some of the stuff that will be discussed and covered when trying to make this decision.
And so there would be this index piece, there would be some way of looking at the street network and going through, and so would it be about the decision to go with whatever that percentage is? I'm assuming it's based on the need and the need for.
Well, it's based on what the actual, so every so many years, the city has a company come in and do this evaluation of our street system. It is coming close to needing to be done again. And so, if they come in and say, you've gone from 75 to 72, then we'll know that the needle is going the opposite direction. If they come in and say, you're at 75, you're holding at 75, and these numbers are all guesses based on my memory, then it's like, okay, where do we go to from here? But it all depends on what this company values, essentially rates all of the entire inner city street system at.
And this process, is a completely separate, both the task force and then city council's decision-making it doesn't operate in conjunction with the TSP
No,
process.
has
in any
nothing
way,
to do
right?
with the TSP.
Yeah, and I'm just throwing that in there. I mean, the only part about that is, I mean, I'm not sure how much, is it paving? I mean, it sounds like it's really about maintenance. I mean,
So the street maintenance, I will just say this. The street maintenance fee has been a pet project of mine since its inception. And one of the things that came out of the original task force was that all the money generated from the street maintenance fee is for curb to curb and under. It cannot be used for sidewalks, it cannot be used for signs or traffic calming. It is strictly for asphalt, gravel, striping, potholes, those sort of things. And every year, Jerry prepares a report for me that says this is how much we spent on all those things, this is how much was generated through the fee, and if more was spent on the things than what was brought into the fee, I'm usually a happy camper. But for over a decade now, since back when I was on the city budget committee, I have been railing on the city council to increase this fee. They have the power, we as the council have the power to do it, but there are some folks, in my opinion, that are reluctant to make that decision. And so that is why this task force is being rebooted, and it is my intention to influence the task force to consider becoming a more permanent thing, where every 3 to 5 years, the task force is reconvened and reviews how the fee is tracking, how the streets are tracking, and provide an element of citizen oversight over the whole process.
other questions? I mean, did that kind of answer?
And it's really probably only going to be 2 meetings. At this point in time, it looks like the goal of the first meeting will be to give some history about the fee and like where we were at when it first started, what's been accomplished, and where things stand today. And then the next meeting is really meant to kind of go into the numbers and such, and then try to drill down to what the recommendation will be. So the goal is to have it all done in 2 meetings, but if it goes into a third, then it'll be what it'll be.
So the sole goal is to really assess the fee and how that will be applied.
Correct.
Okay.
The goal that I get from council is that, A, do we tie the fee to an inflationary mechanism, yes or no? B, is that fee increased at all to try and make up for lost revenue, yes or no? And whatever answers come out of that is what the council will get from the task force. And it's pretty broad. It's going to be about 12 to 15 people. So it's city council, city staff, planning commission, businesses both in the industrial park and the downtown core, folks like Rotary and volunteer organizations in the community. They will be all making up this task force to get a wide range of opinions across all levels.
But then what Don was talking about a prioritization and what you mentioned about a baseline, where does that decision-making get made?
That would be made at Public Works. So
Okay.
they would be given a budget. The money that's raised goes into the streets fund, designated as street maintenance fee money. And then the Public Works folks would say, okay, this is how much money we have. These are the streets that need it the most, and this is what we're going to do.
Because they've already got a long list of stuff that needs to be done. They just have to find out how much money they have and say, this is what we think we can actually get done with it.
Yes, and what's been happening every year that people don't realize is the Public Works staff has been doing this every year since the fee's inception. They will target roads that really need it, or ones that need a slurry seal or crack seal and stuff. The problem is that over time, the list of streets that they're able to do and the distance that they're able to go has shrunk. And so that's why the look is to do this.
Question. You made the comment that the evaluation of the street system is done by an outside party. Is that?
Yeah, there's a similar to the work that's being done for the comp plan, there is a firm that specializes in this thing. So just like with any other study, the city would go out and get bids and then.
And you made the comment that we're just about due for that to happen again?
When I talked to Jerry last, it's within a few years, yes. But what's been tracking for our CPI has been pretty standard. I will say, I will sort of show my cards here. It is highly unlikely that the recommendation will be to get the street system up to 85 or 90%. And I say this because when the street maintenance task force originally met, we were given 3 options. There was a low, a medium, and a high option. Either $3 per household, and we would be able to keep the good streets good and the bad streets would all go to gravel over the course of time. There was the $5 per household, which meant that we would be able to keep the good streets good and fix some of the medium to bad streets, but there would be certain streets that would go to gravel over time. And then there was the high, which was like a $10 to $15 a month fee for a single family household. And that would get the entire street system up to 100% grade over the course of X number of years. And then after it was done, then the street fee could drop down to the $5 and then manage it in perpetuity. But that option was not chosen because the task force felt that it would be met with too much opposition.
So then I guess I would follow along with that is, do we know what kind of deficit we have now?
We don't really have. The city has always worked in a deficit with its streets. It's just by increasing the fee, it would help lessen that deficit. I think that historically, the city will always, this is just my opinion, the city will always work in a deficit against its streets. There's always going to have to be something done, but how far we let that deficit get is what this fee is supposed to control.
Another question, would this also entail repairing our alleys?
So they are part of the street system, but I can tell you that there is an effort from the council to use a different funding mechanism to update those alleys, rather than using street maintenance fee money. Back in the day when the street maintenance fee really started, they had created some signs, so when you would drive around, there'd be a sign that say, hey, look, this street's being updated with your street maintenance fee money, and then those got run over and went away. But the alleys, there's a discussion at city council there's still some capacity, and Councilor Davis might stab me in the face for saying this. There is still some capacity within the urban renewal district to fund some projects, and there is an interest of some council to use that money to update the alleys. And in my conversations with Jerry, we really don't have good, and this is going back to when I was on planning commission, we don't really have a good idea of how we want those alleys to be built so that they last. There's really no codes around alleys. And so the whole impetus of doing this would be to sort of identify what we really want those alleys to be built out to, and then, so it is going to be expensive, and rather than using street maintenance fee money, it's the goal to try and find money elsewhere to do that.
How often is the evaluation of the street system done?
I think it's I'm not sure. I think it's done every 5 or 10 years or something along those lines.
Okay, and then you said that we have another 2 years left before somebody comes in and does it?
It's 2 to 5 years. I'm not 100% sure. Jerry knows that.
So I guess my question would be, are we this committee, are they going to be making their decision on outdated information, or are they going to be making their decision on information that's going to carry us through to the future? So in other words, this group comes in and evaluates again and says, well, you know, you guys made this decision, but you really, to be even hit the bottom line, you need to be here.
Yeah, I think even working with outdated information is better than where we currently sit. Some change needs to be made. The fact that there has not been a change in 12 years, any change is better than no change at all. And that is why I will hopefully be able to influence or convince, I shouldn't say influence because I'm the counselor, I shouldn't be doing that, but convince folks on the task force that it become a reoccurring group so that in 5 years after a new CPI has been done, then the group is convened and says, okay, this is where we're at, this is where we were hoping to be, this is any adjustments that need to be made. And if there is a large adjustment, it would need to be fairly significant. And so I don't think it's something that I would not want to saddle the citizens with all in one shot. Because we're talking $4 or $5 a month more on a single family household to try and make up for lost time. That's a significant amount of money.
I don't know, $4 and $5 isn't a significant amount of money. It's not even a cup of coffee. If you're going to do it once and be done with it.
But you have to also consider that it's that for a single family household, but for businesses, it's even more.
Because they're at a
it's based
different
on
rate.
the number of trips. And something else to keep in mind is that no one is exempt from this fee. So all the other taxing districts pay, not charitable organizations pay, everybody pays into the street system.
Rental?
What do you mean?
They probably don't pay water, sewer, usually that's kind of wrapped in with their fees.
Oh, rental? Yeah, so how rentals work, I'm sorry if I'm like.
No, you're
dominating.
good. No, this is much more involved than I was initially, so this is great.
Yeah.
Continue.
So how rentals work is the fee is assessed to the landowner. So if a fee is not paid, the city is able to put a lien on that landowner's property so that when the property is sold, the city is then made whole on these fees. That's how it's set up for sewer. So in the case of an apartment complex, it's actually the owner of the apartment complex that gets the bill for all of the apartments. And an apartment is something like $3.50 a month. So if it's like 150 unit apartment complex, they get that 350 times 150 or whatever. And then it's up to the rental company to decide, are they going to charge their tenants that fee or are they going to eat it? When I lived in my apartment before buying a house, I paid the fee along with my rent every month. And so manufactured homes are like $4 something a month. One of the things that's kind of interesting is that there's some concerns about the fee because technically it's a tax in fee sheep clothing, you could say. But something that I like to point out to people is that the OLCC is preparing to potentially build a very large complex out in our industrial park. And as a state organization, they pay no tax. So they will be able to use our street system for free if the fee was a tax. But because it's not a tax, because it's a fee, they have to pay. They have to pay for every single a portion for every single truck that goes in and out of that facility. And the only way to get that money out of that group would be to keep this as a fee. And it's the same with a park maintenance fee.
Okay.
I know the federal government wouldn't pay those
Leslie, we raised our
fees.
challenge of affordable
The federal
housing.
government wouldn't be able to pay those
It's
fees, but
on
maybe
the
the
list.
state has.
Yeah, I
So-
think
so
from
noted.
what I understand, the
Yeah,
state
but
has to.
I think it's important though, I mean, because, to the point that the roads don't go to gravel, I mean, that's the goal in my view of this thing. I mean, everything costs more, but it's a lot cheaper, I think, to not let it go to that point I've seen this like patchwork in other places, and at some point, it's going to be an enormous lift when you have a road that's beat up, that's like overlaid and chip sealed forever. So I do agree that this is an important element, because I think that if it gets to that point, I'm guessing it's going to cost way more than it is going to be proactively to try to prevent the full deterioration of roads.
Yeah, so
You
if,
don't need to grind the surface so much if it's already gravel.
yes, that is true.
Yeah.
But yeah, so, and really, when you look at the budget, the street maintenance fee makes up the lion's share of what the streets department has to do all of this work. On a side note, we also charge, part of the original street maintenance fee was regarding a gas tax. So the city of Canby actually charges a 3-cent per gallon gas tax inside the city limits. So like Lone Elder gas station does not pay that fee. If you go to the Fred Meyer, the 76 or whatever on 99E, that 3 cents is figured in there. This group will not be talking about that gas tax. They have been separated. There was some litigation that happened in Salem around ADA ramps at intersections. And in order to make improvements to streets, you have to do those ramps first. And I think they're like $6,000 per corner.
I'm pretty sure they're 15.
Huh?
15.
Okay, $15,000
They're
per corner.
crazy expensive.
So what the city is currently doing, what Public Works is currently doing is they're using the money that's generated from the gas tax to update those ADA crossings so that then the next year, the work can be done on the street, is how they're kind of piggybacking all that.
That's smart.
How many people did you need from planning commission?
Well, just one or two. I mean, I would hope we could get one, one or two.
I'd be happy to
Okay,
volunteer.
would you guys
myself.
both like to do it?
Sure.
That'd be awesome.
Why not?
So Hannah and Dan, okay. Yeah, I mean, Jason, thank you.
Yeah.
Timeliness, because I was not prepared to go into the detail that you have the knowledge bank on.
Do we know
Yeah.
timeline, when these meetings are?
No, so the goal, so Jerry is working on getting folks, I'm working on getting a few folks. The goal is to have have the list of folks set by the 15th, and then.
April 15th.
By April 15th-ish
Yep,
or
yep,
so.
yep.
As well as have the presentation ready for a preliminary run-through from city staff. And then we'll start to reach out to that group to figure out when those meetings can occur. It's a little tricky because the city is also going through its budget in May. We have 2 to 3 budget committee meetings in May as well. So we'll be sort of puzzling all that together.
Your goal is to get this done before budget?
Probably not. Unfortunately, I would have loved to have seen it included in a budget 6 years ago, but I was a plebe citizen back then, so I didn't have any say in the matter. Now that I'm on council, I do. And so if it's not implemented this year, it would be implemented the next year. The recommendations, I mean, it could be that the group says, no, we're not recommending any sort of change. So we'll just see what comes out of the task force.
If you need a representative from the Traffic Safety Committee, I'd be happy to join in as well.
I would recommend chatting with Jerry or the chair about that, because I believe there was, as part of my discussion with him and Eileen, there was talk of reaching out to that group to see if there was somebody who wanted to serve on that, from that group as well. The goal is to get as many people from across the city involved so that when the decision is made, we can show that this decision was not made in a vacuum, that it originally was made by concerned citizens that had all the knowledge that they could available to them at the time, and same now.
I think it's important to have somebody on the traffic committee on that.
Yes, so I would say that was not a person on my list to find, so I would reach out. I know Jerry had talked about reaching out to that group to find somebody. I think how it worked was one of the reasons we chose to finalize the list by the 15th was because your folks' meeting is the first week,
It
like
is
the beginning of the month?
It's the second Wednesday in the morning.
Yeah, so that way you folks would be able to have a meeting to choose that person, and then we would finalize the list after that.
Okay.
Jason, thank you.
Yeah, sorry for
Appreciate it.
taking up so much
No,
of your
this
time.
was-
That
it was
not
good.
that was not my plan.
So I'm going to move right into, just continue. I'm going to beat Dan to it, Walnut Street Extension. I do have an update. Okay, ODOT. Okay. ODOT has approved the traffic signal concept plans and the indenture process, which is for the access. Final engineering plans will be submitted soon to ODOT. There's an anticipated 6-month review timeline. Bids would go out in the winter for spring 2025 award and anticipated spring/summer 2025 construction start is what I have. It slipped slightly. I mean, it's still generally on for 2025, though. I mean, that's what I have. That's what I had another question from someone else today, and we're like, this is a public works driven thing, but we contacted Kern McLeod, and this is what they gave us.
Mark your
So-
calendar.
I guess my question is, can we go ahead and start building this thing now that we have this? And just, when ODOT decides to let us hook into 99, we have it all done except for that?
I think that there was a need to go through these ODOT processes before they're going to allow us to construct. And I know this because even conversions of the Dairy Queen to Chipotle, there's a pretty significant review at ODOT. I had to intervene and make some calls on that to make it easier for them because they are very, programmatic in their approach. So I would say, maybe the best case scenario would be that we get everything done and maybe we bid it slightly early in the winter and that maybe brings it to early 2025 as a start. That was kind of what was anticipated before, but I mean, it's still relatively, we're not driving it as the planning department, but we receive all the questions. It seems like it comes to us for that, but we're anxious for it as well because it does have a lot to do with the development that will happen up in that area, the anticipated development, stuff that, like the upzoning I talk about tonight about looking for areas that would be upzoned, what would the criteria be? Well, obviously, having a brand new road in an area that's already comprehensively planned policy-wise to be a different mix of uses would be, in my opinion, some strong criteria for looking at upzoning. So I understand, but we're not driving this, so it's the best I can give you.
At least he had dates.
What?
He had firm dates now.
And I knew you were going to ask. So,
Firm as Jell-O.
Yeah, exactly.
So I won't give you the entire litany of upcoming hearings over the next several months, but I am going to tell you what the next one is going to be. It'll be on fencing. And the fencing code, a work session on April 8th. Ryan Potter will be providing that presentation. So that's going to be followed by, again, back to housing needs and housing production on April 22nd. I think we're going to be back on fencing again. This is rough, but June 10th. And then we'll probably be in hearings in August is my hope for that. It's another item that's out there and then to council on, it would be after that, September. So that's kind of where that's at. That's a pretty another ambitious thing, but we need to get that addressed because that is an important element as we continue to move forward. With that will close out. Unless you have other questions, I'm happy to answer, but that's pretty much our summary for tonight.
Knightsbridge closure?
I heard something about that, and I don't remember the dates. It was in passing, and it wasn't really even directed to me, but I think, I want to say it's, was out several months before they were going to do it, but I can get back to you on that.
I'd just be curious,
Yeah.
it's going to have a big impact on what we're doing.
Yeah, I mean, it is a big item, so let me see what I can find on that.
If nothing's changed, I believe it's late summer, fall
Still
this year.
That's what you were saying
fall.
last time.
That's the optimistic,
That's so they
Cool,
can
at
get all
this
those
point.
big barges up the Malala.
yeah.
Bridge raising. All right.
That's
Well,
what
the guy said it was just exactly what they were doing up in 205, so, you know, I'm just.
I don't know who that guy was, but I'm not sure I
want to
trust
be there
him.
with my camera, I'm going to take some pictures of that.
Commissioner Llewellyn, anything from afar?
Nope, I'm good.
Very well. If there aren't any other comments, we can entertain a motion for adjourn.
Move to adjourn this work session.
I'll second.
By roll call vote, starting with Commissioner Llewellyn.
Aye.
Commissioner Driscoll.
Aye.
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 Very well, we are adjourned. Thank you very much, City of Canby.